The world was broken. Earth, once a vibrant blue sphere teeming with life, now lay in ruins. The year was 2147, and humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction. Towering alien machines loomed over the remains of cities, their cold, metallic surfaces glinting under the dim sunlight that filtered through thick layers of ash-filled clouds. These invaders, known as the Vraxians, were biomechanical horrors, part living organism, part machine. They moved with unnatural precision, their glowing red eyes scanning for any sign of resistance. And resistance there was, though it was small, scattered, and desperate. In the crumbling remains of Chicago, a group of survivors huddled together in the basement of an old skyscraper. The building's upper floors had long since collapsed, but the lower levels still offered some protection from the relentless Vraxian patrols. Among the survivors was Captain Alex Carter, a man whose face bore the lines of countless battles fought and losses endured. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and his once bright eyes now carried a shadow of weariness. But despite everything, Alex refused to give up. He paced back and forth in the dimly lit room, glancing occasionally at the makeshift barricade that separated them from the outside world. Beside him stood Dr. Laura Bennett, a scientist who had once worked for one of the largest tech companies on Earth. Before the invasion, her days were filled with research and innovation. Now she spent her time trying to understand the Vraxians' technology, hoping to find a way to fight back. Her glasses were cracked, and her lab coat was torn, but her determination remained unshaken. On a rickety table in the corner, she had spread out pieces of alien machinery, scavenged from destroyed Vraxian units. Each piece was a puzzle, and Laura was determined to solve it. The rest of the group consisted of soldiers and civilians alike. There was Mia Harper, a former fighter pilot whose sharp tongue matched her quick reflexes. She had lost her family in the early days of the invasion, and now channeled her grief into anger, using it to fuel her will to survive. Then there was Ethan Cole, a quiet man who rarely spoke unless necessary. He kept to himself, always watching, always listening. No one knew much about him, but his skills as a mechanic made him invaluable to the group. Despite their efforts, morale was low. Food supplies were running dangerously short, and the constant threat of discovery weighed heavily on everyone's minds. The air was thick with tension, and conversations were few and far between. Most of the time, the only sounds were the distant hum of Vraxian drones flying overhead or the occasional rumble of collapsing buildings in the distance. One evening, as the group sat in silence around a flickering lantern, Alex broke the quiet. "We can't keep living like this," he said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "If we don't do something soon, we'll either starve or be found. Either way, it's over." Laura looked up from her work. "There might be a way," she said hesitantly. "I've been studying these components. If I'm right, the Vraxians rely on a central neural network to coordinate their actions. If we could disrupt that—" "But how?" Mia interrupted, crossing her arms. "We barely have enough firepower to take down one of their patrol units, let alone their entire system." "That's why we need to think bigger," Alex replied. "We can't win by fighting them head-on. We need to hit them where it hurts, cut off their ability to communicate, confuse them, make them vulnerable." The room fell silent again as the weight of his words sank in. It was a risky plan, perhaps even suicidal. But deep down, they all knew it was their only chance. For now, survival wasn't enough. They needed hope, even if it felt like a fragile flame in the darkness. And so, with nothing left to lose, they began preparing for what might be their final stand, or their last shot at reclaiming their world. The next morning, the group set out on a scavenging mission. Supplies were running dangerously low, and they needed food, medicine, and anything else they could salvage from the ruins of the city. Alex led the way, his rifle slung over his shoulder, scanning the horizon for any signs of Vraxian activity. Laura followed close behind, clutching the small backpack filled with tools in case they stumbled upon more alien tech. Mia and Ethan brought up the rear, their eyes darting nervously between the shadows of crumbling buildings. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of rusted metal or the distant hum of Vraxian drones circling overhead. The air smelled of smoke and decay, a constant reminder of how much the world had changed. As they moved cautiously through the wreckage, Alex signaled for the group to stop. Ahead of them was a collapsed building, its foundation cracked and unstable. Something glinted beneath the rubble, a faint otherworldly glow that seemed out of place among the destruction. "What is that?" Mia whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. "I don't know," Alex replied, stepping forward carefully. "But we're going to find out." They began clearing away chunks of concrete and twisted metal, working quickly but quietly. After several minutes of digging, they uncovered what appeared to be an ancient artifact. It was roughly the size of a football, smooth and metallic, with intricate patterns etched into its surface. The glow pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Laura knelt beside it, her eyes wide with fascination. This isn't Vraxian," she murmured, running her fingers lightly over the object. "It's older, much older. I've never seen anything like it." "Does it do anything?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. "I'm not sure yet," Laura admitted. "But if I'm right, it could be part of something bigger, something powerful, maybe even something that can help us fight back." Alex frowned, studying the artifact closely. "If it's important, then the Vraxians will want it too. We need to figure out what it is, and fast." Over the next few days, Laura worked tirelessly to analyze the artifact. She set up a makeshift lab in their hideout, surrounded by wires, monitors, and pieces of alien machinery. The others did their best to assist, though most of the technical details went over their heads. Finally, after hours of testing, Laura made a breakthrough. "It's a fragment," she announced, holding up the artifact for everyone to see. "A piece of a larger device. Based on my readings, there are 3 more pieces scattered across the globe. If we can find them all and assemble the device, we might be able to disrupt the Vraxians' neural network." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Finding one fragment had been difficult enough. Locating 3 more would be nearly impossible, especially with the Vraxians hunting them at every turn. "We don't have a choice," Alex said finally, breaking the silence. "If this is our only shot at turning the tide, then we have to take it." Mia crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "Even if we manage to find the other pieces, how do we know this thing will work? What if it's just another dead end?" "It's a risk," Laura admitted, "but it's also our best chance. Without it, we're just waiting to die." Ethan remained quiet, his gaze fixed on the artifact. He didn't say much, but the tension in his shoulders suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Still, no one argued further. They all knew the truth. Staying put meant certain death. At least this way, they had a glimmer of hope, a fragile, flickering light in the darkness. The decision was made. They would leave the relative safety of their hideout and venture into the unknown, searching for the remaining fragments. It was a dangerous plan, perhaps even suicidal. But as Alex looked around at the faces of his companions, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. For the first time in months, they had a purpose, a reason to keep fighting. And so, with the artifact safely packed away, the group prepared to set out once again. The road ahead would be perilous, filled with danger at every turn. But deep down, they all knew one thing for certain. If they succeeded, they might just give humanity a fighting chance. And sometimes, that was enough to keep moving forward. The journey to find the second artifact was anything but easy. The group left the ruins of Chicago behind, heading west toward what Laura believed might be the location of the next fragment. Her calculations were based on patterns she had noticed in the first artifact's energy signature, but even she admitted it wasn't an exact science. Still, they had no other leads, and staying put wasn't an option. The landscape grew increasingly hostile as they traveled. The once familiar highways were now cracked and overgrown with weeds, while abandoned cars littered the roads like tombstones. Wild animals, driven mad by years of exposure to alien toxins, roamed freely, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. At night, the group huddled together around small fires, taking turns keeping watch for both predators and Vraxian patrols. One evening, as they camped near the remains of a gas station, Mia spotted movement in the distance. "Over there," she whispered, pointing toward a cluster of trees. Alex raised his rifle, squinting into the shadows. A figure emerged cautiously, a woman, her face streaked with dirt and her clothes torn. She held her hands up in surrender. "I'm not here to fight," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I saw your fire." Alex hesitated before lowering his weapon slightly. "Who are you?" "My name's Mia Harper," the woman replied, then paused when she realized the soldier beside her shared her name. "Well, guess that makes things confusing. Call me Harper." Harper explained that she had been living off the land since the invasion, scavenging whatever she could to survive. She had seen the destruction the Vraxians had caused firsthand. They had wiped out her entire family during one of their raids. Now she wanted revenge, though she hadn't found a way to make it happen on her own. "We're looking for something," Alex told her cautiously. "Something that might help us fight back. If you want to join us, fine, but don't slow us down." Harper nodded eagerly. "I can handle myself, and I know these parts better than most." With Harper's knowledge of the terrain, the group made better progress. She led them through hidden paths and shortcuts, avoiding areas known to be crawling with Vraxian drones. Along the way, she proved herself useful, taking down rogue wildlife and even spotting a hidden cache of canned food in the basement of an old farmhouse. Slowly, the others began to trust her, or at least tolerate her presence. Their destination was New York City, or what was left of it. Once a bustling metropolis, it was now partially submerged due to rising sea levels caused by the Vraxians' atmospheric manipulation. The streets were flooded, and skeletal skyscrapers jutted out of the water like broken teeth. According to Laura, the second artifact was likely buried somewhere in the financial district, deep beneath layers of debris and mud. Reaching the site was no small feat. They had to navigate treacherous waters using a makeshift raft cobbled together from driftwood and old barrels. The air smelled of salt and decay, and the sound of dripping water echoed eerily around them. At one point, a massive robotic snake-like creature burst from the depths, its metallic body glinting menacingly. Everyone scrambled to defend themselves, firing wildly until the beast retreated with a screech. Finally, they'd reached the ruins of a bank building. Inside, they found the artifact resting on a pedestal in a flooded vault. It pulsed with the same soft glow as the first fragment, confirming Laura's suspicions. But as they prepared to leave, the sound of Vraxian engines filled the air. A patrol had found them. "Go!" Alex shouted, urging Laura and Ethan to carry the artifact while he and Harper provided cover fire. Bullets ricocheted off the walls as they fought their way back to the raft. Just as they pushed off from the shore, Harper turned and fired one last shot, disabling a pursuing drone. As they floated away, the group caught their breath, exhausted but relieved. They had the second artifact, but the cost of getting it weighed heavily on all of them. Harper looked at Alex, her expression grim. "You really think this is going to work?" she asked. "I don't know," Alex admitted. "But if it doesn't, we'll go down fighting." And with that, they set their sights on the next fragment, knowing full well that the hardest part was yet to come. The group moved south, their path taking them through dense forests and barren wastelands. The second artifact was safely stored in a reinforced case carried by Ethan, who rarely spoke unless spoken to. His silence had grown heavier since the encounter in New York, and no one could tell if it was guilt, fear, or something else entirely that weighed on him. Laura spent most of her time studying the two fragments, trying to understand how they connected and what kind of power they might unlock. Alex, meanwhile, kept a close eye on Harper, still unsure if he could fully trust her despite her help. Their destination was South America, where Laura believed the third artifact lay hidden in the ruins of an ancient temple deep within the Amazon rainforest. The journey was long and grueling, with the group facing not only the harsh environment, but also the constant threat of Vraxian patrols. Supplies were running low again, and tempers flared as exhaustion set in. One night, as they camped near a dried-up riverbed, Ethan disappeared. At first, the others thought he had gone to scout ahead or relieve himself, but when he didn't return after an hour, panic began to spread. Alex organized a quick search, splitting the group into pairs. It wasn't long before they found him, or rather, what he had done. Ethan was standing at the edge of the camp, speaking quietly into a small communication device. When Alex approached, Ethan froze, his face pale. "I didn't have a choice," he stammered, dropping the device to the ground. "They would have killed us all if I hadn't made a deal." "What are you talking about?" Alex demanded, his voice low but sharp. "The Vraxians," Ethan admitted, tears welling up in his eyes. "I told them where we're going. I couldn't keep risking our lives for something that might not even work." For a moment, everyone was silent. Betrayal hung heavy in the air, choking off any words that might have been said. Harper clenched her fists, ready to lash out. But Alex stepped between them. "You put us all in danger," he said coldly. "But I'm not going to waste time punishing you. We need every hand we can get if we're going to survive this." Ethan looked down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," he muttered, though no one seemed convinced. The next day, the group pressed on, now more cautious than ever. They knew the Vraxians would be waiting for them, but turning back wasn't an option. As they entered the dense jungle, the air grew thick and humid, making each step feel like a struggle. Strange noises echoed around them, chirps, growls, and rustling leaves, but none of it compared to the dread of knowing their enemies were closing in. When they finally reached the temple, it was nothing like they had expected. Overgrown vines covered its crumbling stone walls, and statues of forgotten gods stood guard at the entrance. Inside, the air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of earth and moss. Laura led the way, using her scanner to locate the artifact. It wasn't long before they found it resting on an altar in the central chamber, glowing softly like the others. But their victory was short-lived. A squad of Vraxian drones descended from above, cutting off their escape route. The group fought fiercely, using every weapon they had, but the odds were against them. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, Harper made a split-second decision. She grabbed a grenade from her belt and charged toward the drones, shouting for the others to run. The explosion shook the entire temple, collapsing part of the ceiling and blocking the Vraxians' advance. The group barely escaped with their lives, and the artifact, but Harper was gone. Her sacrifice left a void in the group, a reminder of the cost of their mission. As they regrouped outside the temple, Alex looked at the artifact in his hands. "We owe her everything," he said quietly, "and we owe it to her to finish this." With heavy hearts, they continued their journey, knowing the final piece awaited them in Antarctica, and that the hardest battles were yet to come. The journey to Antarctica was unlike anything the group had faced before. After Harper's sacrifice, the weight of their mission felt heavier than ever. The third artifact was secure, but the thought of what lay ahead filled them with both determination and dread. Laura explained that the final piece was located in a remote research station buried beneath the ice. It was once used by scientists studying climate change, but now it was overrun by Vraxian forces who had turned it into a fortified outpost. Reaching Antarctica required crossing treacherous terrain, including frozen oceans and icy mountains. Supplies were running dangerously low, and the bitter cold tested their endurance. Frostbite became a constant threat, and every step forward felt like a battle against nature itself. Despite these challenges, Alex kept the group moving, reminding them why they couldn't give up. As they approached the edge of the continent, Alex made a decision that would change everything. "We can't do this alone," he said during a brief rest stop. "If we're going to take down the Vraxians, we need help from other survivors." The idea wasn't new, but it had always been dismissed as impossible. Human factions were scattered and distrustful after years of isolation. Many had turned inward, focusing only on survival. But Alex insisted they try. He divided the group. Laura stayed behind to guard the artifacts, while Alex and Ethan set out to find allies. Their first stop was a nomadic tribe led by Daniel Hayes, a grizzled man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. His people lived in makeshift shelters built from scrap metal and animal hides, constantly on the move to avoid detection. At first, Daniel refused to listen. "Why should we risk our lives for some half-baked plan?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Alex didn't back down. "Because if we don't stop them now, there won't be a tomorrow. For any of us." After hours of persuasion and showing Daniel the artifacts, they finally agreed to join the fight. Next, they sought out Rachel Monroe, the leader of an underground city hidden beneath the ruins of Buenos Aires. Her people were better equipped than most, with working generators and stockpiles of food. Convincing her was harder. She had lost too many to the Vraxians and feared losing more. But when Alex promised that this was humanity's last chance, she relented. With the tribes united under one banner, the coalition prepared for the assault on the Antarctic outpost. Weapons were distributed, strategies planned, and roles assigned. For the first time in years, disparate groups of humans came together, driven not by hatred or fear, but by hope, a fragile, flickering flame that refused to die. As they marched toward the frozen battlefield, Alex looked at the faces around him. Some were young, barely old enough to hold a weapon. Others were seasoned fighters hardened by loss. Each carried their own scars, but all shared the same resolve. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for everyone who had fallen, for every dream stolen by the Vraxians. When they reached the outskirts of the outpost, the sight was daunting. Towering walls of ice reinforced with alien technology surrounded the compound, patrolled by drones and biomechanical soldiers. Inside, the fourth artifact awaited, but so did death. "We've come too far to turn back," Alex said, addressing the group one last time. "Remember why we're here. Remember what we're fighting for." The signal was given, and the attack began. Explosions lit up the night sky as human forces clashed with the Vraxians. Bullets flew, grenades detonated, and screams echoed across the icy plains. It was chaos, brutal, and unrelenting. Yet amid the carnage, something extraordinary happened. Humanity fought not as individuals, but as one. For the first time since the invasion, the Vraxians faltered. Their perfect coordination wavered under the sheer ferocity of the human counterattack. And deep within the heart of the outpost, Laura worked tirelessly to retrieve the final artifact, knowing that the fate of the world rested in her hands. The battle raged on, the icy winds carrying the sounds of gunfire and explosions across the frozen wasteland. The human coalition fought with everything they had, their determination outweighing their lack of advanced weapons. Alex led the charge, shouting orders and firing his rifle at the Vraxian drones that buzzed overhead like mechanical hornets. Beside him, Daniel Hayes wielded a makeshift flamethrower, its fiery bursts keeping the biomechanical soldiers at bay. Rachel's people provided cover fire from higher ground, their precision picking off enemies one by one. Despite their efforts, the Vraxians were relentless. Their glowing red eyes scanned the battlefield, targeting anyone who dared to oppose them. The walls of the outpost remained heavily guarded, and breaking through seemed impossible. Laura, who had been working tirelessly inside the compound, sent a desperate message over the comms. "I found the artifact, but I'm trapped. They're closing in." Alex clenched his jaw, knowing what he had to do. "We need to get to her," he said to Ethan, who was reloading his weapon nearby. "Cover me." Ethan nodded, though his guilt still lingered from his earlier betrayal. He had proven himself since then, fighting bravely and protecting the group, but the memory of his actions weighed heavily on him. "I'll hold them off," he replied, raising his rifle. "Go." Alex moved quickly, weaving through the chaos as bullets whizzed past him. Behind him, Ethan stood firm, firing round after round at the advancing Vraxians. His aim was steady, his resolve unshaken. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was making up for his mistake, not just to the group, but to himself. Inside the outpost, Laura worked frantically to free the artifact from its pedestal. It was locked in place by some kind of alien mechanism, and she cursed under her breath as her tools slipped on the icy surface. Just as she managed to pry it loose, a group of Vraxian soldiers entered the room, their weapons trained on her. She froze, clutching the artifact tightly. "You're not taking this," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. But before the Vraxians could act, Alex burst into the room, firing his weapon and forcing them to retreat. Together, he and Laura made a run for the exit, dodging blasts of energy as alarms blared throughout the compound. Outside, the battle had reached a critical point. The human forces were outnumbered and beginning to falter. Dozens had fallen, and those still standing were exhausted. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, a sudden roar filled the air. A squadron of guerrilla fighters descended from the hills, led by none other than Ethan Cole, except this time, he wasn't alone. With him was Mia Harper. Mia had survived the explosion in the Amazon temple, badly injured but alive. She had tracked the group to Antarctica, determined to see the mission through. Her arrival turned the tide of the battle. The reinforcements overwhelmed the Vraxians, giving Alex and Laura enough time to reach safety. As the group regrouped outside the outpost, Alex looked at Mia, relief washing over him. "I thought you were gone," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't go down that easy," she replied with a weak smile, though her injuries were clear. With all 4 artifacts now in their possession, the coalition began to retreat, leaving the battered outpost behind. The cost of victory was high. Too many lives had been lost, but the sense of accomplishment was undeniable. They had done what once seemed impossible, retrieved the final piece needed to disrupt the Vraxians' neural network. Back at their temporary base, Laura set to work assembling the artifacts. The others watched silently, their faces etched with exhaustion and hope. If the device worked, it could cripple the Vraxians' ability to coordinate their attacks. But activating it would require someone to infiltrate the Vraxian mothership orbiting Earth. A suicide mission. When Laura finished explaining the plan, Alex stepped forward without hesitation. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "It has to be me." No one argued. They all knew the risks, but they also knew Alex was the best choice. As he prepared for the mission, Laura approached him, her eyes filled with both fear and admiration. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes, I do," Alex replied, placing a hand on her shoulder. "For everyone we've lost, and everyone we're fighting for." The stage was set. The final gambit was about to begin. The Vraxian mothership loomed above Earth like a dark omen, its massive form blocking out the stars. It was the heart of the invasion, a fortress in the sky that controlled every drone, soldier, and weapon on the planet. For Alex, standing on the edge of a battered spacecraft, it felt impossible to even think about breaching it. But there was no turning back now. This was humanity's last chance. The spacecraft he was boarding had been salvaged from the ruins of an old military base and hastily repaired by Ethan and the others. It wasn't much. Its engine sputtered. Its hull was patched together with scrap metal, but it would get him close enough to dock with the mothership. Laura had programmed the navigation system, her hand shaking as she entered the final coordinates. "You'll have exactly 10 minutes once you're inside," she told him, her voice tight with emotion. "After that, the device will overload, and, well, you know what happens next." Alex nodded, forcing a smile. 10 minutes is all I need." Before stepping aboard, he took a moment to look at his companions. Maya sat slumped against a wall, her injuries bandaged but still visible. She gave him a weak thumbs up, trying to mask her worry with bravado. Ethan stood nearby, his expression unreadable but his posture stiff, as if bracing himself for the worst. And then there was Laura, who couldn't meet his eyes. She fidgeted with her scanner, muttering something under her breath about recalibrating the device. "Hey," Alex said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, we did everything we could. That's something to be proud of." Laura looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. I wish I could go instead of you." "You've already done more than anyone else," Alex replied. "This is my job. Trust me, I'll make sure it works." With one last nod to the group, Alex climbed into the spacecraft and sealed the hatch behind him. The engines roared to life, shaking the ground beneath them. As the craft lifted off, the others watched silently, their hearts heavy with dread. They knew this might be the last time they ever saw him. Inside the cockpit, Alex focused on the task ahead. The journey to the mothership was short but nerve-wracking. Vraxian patrols swarmed around the vessel, their red eyes scanning for intruders. Somehow, the makeshift ship blended in just enough to avoid detection, thanks to Laura's clever programming. When the docking bay came into view, Alex exhaled slowly, steadying his nerves. The moment he stepped onto the mothership, the air felt wrong, cold, and metallic, tinged with an eerie hum that vibrated through his bones. Alien symbols glowed faintly on the walls, and biomechanical creatures patrolled the corridors, their movements precise and mechanical. Alex moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding direct confrontation. Every second counted. He reached the central chamber, a vast, domed room filled with pulsating machinery. At its core was the neural network, a swirling mass of light and energy that connected every Vraxian unit on Earth. Alex placed the assembled artifact at its base and activated it. The device hummed to life, its glow growing brighter with each passing second. An alarm blared, and Vraxian soldiers began pouring into the chamber. Alex fired his weapon, taking down as many as he could, but he knew he wouldn't last long. His 10 minutes were almost up. As the device reached critical levels, the neural network started to destabilize, causing chaos throughout the mothership. Lights flickered, machines sparked, and the biomechanical soldiers faltered, their coordination disrupted. Through the chaos, Alex thought of his friends. Their faces flashed in his mind, giving him strength. He whispered a silent goodbye as the device exploded in a blinding flash of light, engulfing the chamber and severing the Vraxian's connection to Earth. Far below, the human coalition watched as the mothership shuddered and broke apart, its fragments burning up in the atmosphere. Cheers erupted among the survivors, but Laura remained silent, her gaze fixed on the sky. Alex was gone, but his sacrifice had saved them all. For the first time in years, hope burned brightly, not just for survival, but for a future where humanity could rebuild and thrive. The fight wasn't over, but now they had a chance. And sometimes that was enough. The destruction of the Vraxian mothership sent shockwaves across the planet. Without their central neural network, the biomechanical invaders became disorganized and confused. Their once perfect coordination faltered, leaving them vulnerable to attack. The human coalition seized the opportunity, launching coordinated assaults on Vraxian strongholds around the globe. For the first time in years, humanity had the upper hand. In Antarctica, Laura stood at the edge of the icy plains, staring up at the sky where the mothership had been. Her hands were still trembling, not from the cold but from the weight of what had happened. Alex's sacrifice weighed heavily on her heart, but she knew he wouldn't want her to dwell on it. "He gave us a chance," she whispered to herself, clutching the scanner tightly. "We can't waste it." Mia leaned against a nearby crate, her injuries finally starting to heal. She watched Laura quietly for a moment before speaking. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "We rebuild," Laura replied, turning to face the group. "Not just our cities or our technology, but ourselves. We've been broken for too long. Now we have a chance to start over." Ethan nodded, his guilt slowly giving way to purpose. "I'll help however I can," he said firmly. Alex believed in this. So do I. Word of the mothership's destruction spread quickly, reaching even the most isolated corners of Earth. Survivors who had given up hope began to emerge from hiding, drawn together by the promise of a new beginning. Under Daniel Hayes' leadership, the nomadic tribes worked alongside Rachel Monroe's underground city to establish supply lines and safe zones. Farmers planted crops in reclaimed soil, engineers repaired old machinery, and teachers gathered children to pass on knowledge that had nearly been lost. But rebuilding wasn't easy. The scars left by the invasion ran deep, not just on the land, but in the hearts of those who had endured it. Many struggled with grief, anger, and fear, unsure if they could ever trust again. Yet, amidst the pain, small acts of kindness began to take root. A shared meal here, a helping hand there. It was enough to remind people that they weren't alone. Laura dedicated herself to studying the Praxian technology left behind, hoping to use it for good rather than destruction. With Maya's help, she built communication systems to reconnect distant communities and designed tools to purify water and generate power. Slowly but surely, life began to return to Earth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Mia approached Laura. "Do you think Alex would be proud of us?" she asked. Laura smiled faintly, looking out at the makeshift camp bustling with activity. "I know he would," she said. "He always believed in us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves." As the days turned into weeks, stories of Alex Carter spread among the survivors. He became a symbol of courage and selflessness, a reminder that even in the darkest times, one person could make a difference. Statues were erected in his honor, and songs were sung about his bravery. But more importantly, his actions inspired others to step forward, to lead, and to fight for a better future. Years later, Earth bore little resemblance to the wasteland it had once been. Cities rose anew, powered by clean energy and guided by lessons learned from the past. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged stronger, not because of superior weapons or technology, but because of its resilience and unity. On a quiet hill overlooking a thriving town, a plaque marked the spot where Alex's spacecraft had launched. Inscribed on it were simple words, *, all hope was lost, but humans held the line. *. And so, the story ended not with despair, but with hope. The kind of hope that comes from knowing that even in the face of unimaginable odds, people can come together, rise above, and build something beautiful from the ashes of the past.